Okay, buying a domain name is something like registering your business name with the state. So now you have a proper name that's out there, and that book is shared across all the internet, right? There's only one WelshTechnologies.com allowed on all of the internet. I can buy that name through multiple vendors, all of which will register it in that main registry. Then there's the equivalent of the telephone book that turns names into numbers. The internet really runs on IP addresses, which is numbers. It doesn't care about the names. So we need a system to convert the name into the number, and that's DNS. It's domain name server. In DNS, which can be done by the same company as a registrar or another company, right? That can be, those functions can be split apart. That turns www.WelshTechnologies into some numeric address. Then email is just another service that can be with the registrar or Office 365 or Google or any other third party. Some companies host their own email. And what you do is you set up the entries in DNS so that the right name points to the right mail server. And that's how all those pieces are connected.
And pointing, that's going to usually be in the person who owns the domain.
Right.
For you, right? Because that's where it's going to go there and go, anything else connected to this?
Right. So when you buy a domain, you first configure who is the registrar for DNS, and you can switch the DNS registrar, and then you're adding entries to DNS. So DNS is like the phone book. You flip through the phone book with a name. For those of you that remember, phone books used to be a physical thing. You flip through the phone book for the name, and you get the number.
Yeah.
Right? And email is something like a post office box.
I see.
Right? So I can have the mail come to my house, but I can also have it come to any PO box that I want. By managing that central DNS server, I can tell it where I want my post office box to be, at which post office the box is going to be. That's like the PO box number.
And what is the thing in the records on DNS management?
Sure.
Which what we have here is GoDaddy's DNS management.
Yeah, all this stuff is public, right? There's a way to look these things up from anybody's computer. Again, this is the equivalent of the phone book, right? NS, that's the name server. So that says who owns the phone book for mysocialmediamastery.com.
I see.
And again, back in the day, if your phone was listed with AT&T versus Verizon home phone, that's whose phone book you were in. So this is where you set up the phone book, essentially.
I see.
So now anything I want to know about mysocialmediamastery.com, my computer is told that this is the authority.
Okay.
So when I type www.mysocialmediamastery.com, my computer first says to the routers on the internet, who owns mysocialmediamastery.com, and I get this record back. Then I ask this record, what can you tell me about www? So www is set up as a CNAME, and a CNAME is canonical name, and it essentially means an alias. So instead of putting the same number for 20 different names, I can tell them all that they're an alias for something else. So this CNAME record for www is going to come back to me, and it's going to say, well, www is located wherever @ is located, and @ is sort of the main record without anything in front of the domain name. That's an A record, and the A record has the address for that name.
Right, and so that the physical address, that 104.196.13.170, is publicly findable.
That's right.
And that is like the number connected to this domain.
Right.
And then if we have a website connected to it, it's got to kind of hook into that, because it hooks to that number, and that's where the code is.
Right. So when I type www.mysocialmediamastery.com, my browser behind the scenes asks this, what number is it? The first response it gets is the CNAME record for www, and it says, find out what @ is. Then my computer asks again, what's the number for @? It gets this number, and then finally my computer makes a request to this number, passing along the www.socialmediamastery to the server that lives there. Then the server that lives there says, oh, you want www.mysocialmediamastery, and it serves up a WordPress site or static code or whatever code lives there that matches that domain name. So you could have multiple sites living at this address that would be called like shared hosting. And the server is responsible for converting the combination of the address that you hit the server on plus the name to serve up your site.
So if it could be Bob's Pizza at the same IP address,
right,
then it would know to start delivering the code of Bob's Pizza back to the web browser to display.
Right. And if I were to browse just to this number, I would get whatever that server thinks is the default website for that server. Could be Bob's Pizza or My Social Media Mastery or a third site that we didn't mention.
So the server needs the physical letters.com and it needs the IP to know how to match it up.
Right. That's correct.
Really good piece to have. And then the last thing is the record for the email. And people don't realize the email's managed separate from the basic website.
Right. And so this domain name doesn't have an MX record. MX stands for Mail Exchanger. And so when I go to send mail, whatever my mail server is, it comes over here to My Social Media Mastery. It finds out this name server just like before. The name server will tell it the mail exchanger responsible for that mail, and then the mail server, if it's Gmail or Microsoft or whomever is sending the mail, is going to go to that mail server and drop that mail there.
Okay, and so then it will catch it and go, yep, I will take responsibility for this and pass it on. So we're going to go ahead and add that for this one as well.
Right. So we're going to add an MX record. And we have to go over to Google to look up how they want us to configure this for Google to be the MX record for this domain.
Excellent. The last thing to mention that I want to mention is people don't realize it, but your web browser, for those of us who had a programming background, is more like an interpreter.
Right.
Real time taking instructions like a recipe and converting them.
Right.
So if you're old enough to know what BASIC is and BASIC interpreter, not less people around like that.
Yeah.
But that means people don't realize it's taking instruction codes like a recipe and converting it real time in front of you.
Yeah. So when you hit go in a browser, you type in an address and hit go, right? The steps that we talked about with DNS, your browser is doing all of that first, right?
Yeah.
First thing it has to do is figure out what IP address am I asking for. Then it asks for that and it sends a header with the name, the domain name that you actually typed in the box, so that the server can serve up the right code. Then the server sends back essentially a text file, right, which is HTML. The browser then takes all of that text and has to work out like a newspaper layout, how to build columns, how to build rows, what color backgrounds are, widths, padding, fonts, all that kind of stuff, and packages it back up to what we see. So the internet doesn't really look anything like what we see. It's just a terminal translating a bunch of plain text into something that's, much more fun to use than
more like the Matrix.
Than anchor text. That's right.
That's where they got the idea for the movie for the sci-fi fans.
Right.
So it's kind of amazing how all this works.
Yeah.
And then Cisco was, I guess, the manufacturer of the first DNS servers, or a lot of them.
Right.
That's how they built their business, and they're basically going, "Give me this." Right. And I know, and I'll say, oh yeah, martinbrosman.com. I know what that is.
Right.
And let's go over here, and I found an IP address for it, and let's pass these things back and forth, and that's what made it all explode.
Yeah, and there's not one authoritative machine on the internet, right? So this whole DNS thing, this whole sort of shared phone book system, if you will, it's based on lots of different routers having various pieces of the puzzle and working out which one is closer, which one has some information cached, to figure out how all this flows. So on the one hand, it's definitely a decentralized kind of system. On the other hand, it could be gamed. I mean, I'm not a hacker, but I know enough to know that it could be, it could be manipulated.
And that's why we want,
and has in the past.
and that's why we
Had
want
issues in the past.
good security, smart security
Right.
people working
Right.
to protect us on
That's
that.
right. That's right. And that's why for anyone who has a website, SSL, which is when you get HTTPS and the little lock icon,
Yeah.
that's a minimum. It keeps anyone from snooping, and so nobody can listen in on the conversation between your computer and the server that you're talking to when that lights up. So it becomes really important when you're at a coffee shop using their Wi-Fi network and you log into your bank. You don't want that username and password to be readable by the people who are providing you with Wi-Fi. And without HTTPS, it's pretty easy for them to pick up all the traffic in and out of your machine.
Excellent. Kevin, thanks for a quick improv.
Sure.
How can they learn more about you? You're a good friend. And
Yeah, sure. So WelshTechnologies.com, or you can find me. I'm Kevin Welsh. You can find me on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to look me up there.
thanks so much.
Sure.